I heard when I got here, if you don't believe, believe because I believe. Kind of like the fake it till you make it. And so there were times when I didn't believe. And thankfully, I had a sponsor that I still have today. It's going on a little over 18 years. I've had the same sponsor. I believed her. I trusted her because my life was in the crapper. And I didn't want to keep doing that. I'm gonna get my dog. So so that was that, you know. I got out of treatment. I went back to Raleigh. I was living in an apartment, and I knew it was time to go home. I knew it was time to go back to Asheville. I had a home there. Raleigh was not my place. There was too much asphalt and concrete, and it was I couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't go anywhere that I wouldn't hear, see, feel, smell somebody. And when you're from the mountains and you're from a rural area, oh my God, you know? So I went back home. I stayed in Raleigh about 3 more months and packed up my stuff, and I came back to Asheville. And buddy, I was happy as a clam. Man, everything was great. And what I didn't realize, which I realized about 2 years later, that yes, I have the disease of addiction and I have clinical depression. And that antidepressant totally changed the trajectory of my life, and not using substances. So, I mean, I was just high as a kite and happy, and until I wasn't. So got back to Asheville, and because I worked in the criminal justice system, I got back in the criminal justice system, and I started working for the sheriff at our local detention facility. And I was a detention officer, and my primary role was to coordinate volunteers. So that would be AA people, NA people, religious people, yoga, just whatever volunteers wanted to come in that fit criteria. And so I started doing that, and I was there for about a year before I let anybody know that I was in recovery, because, you just can't divulge to everybody. And so I was able to tell the sheriff, and he basically said, you know what, Val, it's okay. I mean, live your truth. So I was out. So here I was. Well, fast forward back. When I got here, you guys said I got to go to meetings. So I knew I had to go to meetings. I was like, 60 days clean. And so here I am, 7 years out of adult probation parole in Asheville. Asheville's a small town. I knew I was going to run into people that I had worked with, that I had supervised. And so I knew what I had to do, because I wanted to stay clean. I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. And so there was a meeting in my neighborhood. And so I walked up there. Of course, I was late, because that's what we do. I was late. I walk in the meeting. It's a huge meeting in a church, in a circle, and there's one chair left, and it's right beside a guy that I supervised 2 times that went to prison both times. He was a nasty son of a bitch. And I mean, I thought there's going to be a damn ass whipping. I mean, here I walk in, and I mean, the whole room, and I'm sitting by this guy. Shit. So of course I don't remember anything. So the meeting ends, we get up, we hug, and he turned around and looked at me, and he said, Val, keep coming back. I love you. He did the 4th and 5th step in prison. And so he's got over 30 years right now. And that gave me permission. That was, I mean, if he had been ugly, as we say in the South to me, I mean, what would I have done? I'd have gone to double A, but hell, I knew people in double A were fucking everywhere. So that was the beginning of me feeling like I belonged, because I didn't look like a lot of people. My story's not the same as a lot of people. And so what happened was I worked at that jail for 13 years. And that 13 years was a living amends to the 17 years of chaos. I didn't plan that. I didn't know that was going to happen. I even became a part of a first responders peer team for EMS, fire service, law enforcement, because our first responders are dying. The cumulative trauma that they do have and that they're exposed to every day. And, and I firmly believe a lot of what happens with police people that are abusive is because they don't know what to do with their trauma. They also are told to suck it up, rub dirt in it, and go on. And so I became part of the peer team and traveled the Western 20 counties as part of helping our first responders deal with cumulative trauma. And I was the only recovering folk in a law enforcement shirt. So that too was a living amends. I made a video, that I work for a law enforcement agency. And so that was also taking part in breaking the stigma. So then, I get back, I do all that. So about 2 years into it, I come up with this bright idea that I think I'm going to get off my meds, right? So, of course, I titrate off, and my sponsor's a clinician, thank God. But still, what you going to do? You're going to do what you're going to do. It doesn't matter what anybody suggests. And I mean, anyhow, so I get off of it, and buddy, do I nosedive. Oh my God. All that bliss and happiness, it's gone. I'm still not using. And thank God I had a program. If I did not have a program, I don't know what would have happened. I kept going to meetings, step work, talking to my sponsor. And don't you know, this really hot looking guy on a big fat Harley comes driving up with a big mustache, another bad boy. And so he came on the scene just about when I was getting back on my meds. So I was at a very vulnerable place. And supposedly he had 20 some years in recovery. And, I was 2 years in, and anybody that's got double digits, oh, they're gods, all this stuff. That's before I realized time doesn't mean shit. Watch their feet. Doesn't matter what I say, you watch my feet. If my feet do what I say, we're good. But buddy, did he have a big talking about it. But I was so impressed. I was vulnerable. So of course, I take him hostage, and within 6 months we're married. That's what I do. Wow. Again, thank you, God, that I had a program, that I had steps, a sponsor who, she knew that he was a train wreck. But me being the type of person I am, if she had said, Val, you need to get rid of him, he's no good for you. If I didn't get rid of him, I would have fired her. I would have, because I would have felt shame, because that's how I'd been controlled my whole life, was being shamed, right? Well, she didn't. She knew he was a train wreck. And as I have come to learn is, well, you know, Val, that was in your path. That was just in your path. I never asked her what she thought because I was too ashamed. I knew he was a train wreck. Again, that emotional dysfunction. So this brings me to a great point. You know, the bullshit that they say in the rooms, oh, don't get in a relationship until after 1 year. Well, for some people like me, 1 year is not going to undo all of the bullshit that I brought into the program. So I was 2 years, right? 2 years clean, and I get hooked up with this guy. So I don't know who came up with that, but I am not a fan of that one. But here's the thing. Here's what's going to happen. 2 things are going to happen if you get involved with anybody. A year, less than a year, 10 years. You're either going to work a hell of a program or you're going to get loaded. That's it. Those are your choices. So I didn't get loaded. Finally, I was able to trust her, and we made a plan. And man, getting rid of him was like getting shit off my shoe. Oh my God, was it horrible. And it took me forever not to pick up the phone. You know, when he called, I was so just hooked into the potential all my life. It was always about the potential. And oh, he had all this recovery and he says he loves me. I mean, I could not pick up the phone. And I remember I was going to a Pavillon support group. I was driving there. He called. So I pick up the phone, I pull into a parking lot, and for the next hour, I'm talking to him, right? Same old bullshit. I got so mad. If that son of a bitch had been in front of my face, I'd have fucking killed him. That shook me to the bone. I mean, I was vibrating. I was so mad. And so that was like the beginning of me, like, why pick up the phone? What's the point? And I have come to understand that in time, things that used to matter, not going to matter. It's just not going to be a thing anymore. And that's what happened, that I didn't pick up the phone anymore. I didn't engage. I started going to women's meetings. I did what was recommended to me. And if I was at a meeting and he'd come into the meeting, I'd leave. You know, I'm just not, I just learned that. The other thing I learned was I kept him out of my consciousness. I didn't talk to anybody about him. I didn't ask anybody about him. I didn't want to hear about him. For me, that was the best way to just go through the process of recovering and healing, because it tapped in. It's like every loss taps into every other loss. And I would have visceral reactions. And that goes back to earlier trauma. You know, it's about the betrayal, the abandonment. So I got rid of him. And so of course I was riding high for a couple years. And don't you know, here comes another guy. And he was better, you know, he wasn't in the program, but he was another manly man. And I took him hostage. And I guess I was about 7 or 8 years clean then. And I was still so codependent. I wasn't aware enough to know that discomfort in a relationship is not okay. I mean, there's discomfort and there is discussion. There should be more pleasure, more connection than not. And again, because I was raised in this environment of emotional, of no emotional awareness, and me thinking that it was my fault and that he must know better. There were signs and red flags, but I didn't really know what love was. I didn't really know. And I was learning this from my sponsor. My sponsor has taught me what a safe relationship is. She's taught me what safe women are, what safe men are. And here I was, a grown-ass woman, 50 plus years old. I didn't know. I mean, how was I to know, right? It doesn't just happen. So, of course, you know, we get together and I end up selling my house, and he and I build a house together. And so I stick that one out for a while. I mean, I was with him longer than the other two. I mean, pretty short, maybe 7 years. And so finally I left, and I was still working on the potential. I was not watching his feet. I was listening to his words, because it's so painful. It was so painful to hear someone say they love you, they can't think of life without you, and then they don't show you. Because the words, that's what I was told. And my parents showed me through medical care, but there was no understanding of emotion. I was too emotional. I was too loud. It just wasn't okay to be me. And he wasn't showing me what he was telling me, but I was so codependent, so afraid of being alone, that I believed him till I didn't. And so I had another little conversation, or this one was a little shorter, from God. I was out walking my dogs, and it was in January. It was January the 1st, actually. I'm out walking the dog, and, all of a sudden I hear, "You're done." I'm thinking, am I done walking? I thought it was an event. You're done. Well, what am I done with? And what I came to realize, and it took me till March, after a 10-day trip in Belize that was the most excruciating 10 days. What I realized was I was done with the bullshit. I was done with that relationship. So I left, and I was terrified. I had lived with myself for most of my life. I didn't have a home to go to. I'd never been homeless. I always kept a home, so I had an out. And I learned through the next year that, one, how codependent I really was. I started going to Codependence Anonymous. I started realizing and learning what my part was in that. What he did was not okay. And I had a part in everything I do. I have a part in. And I had been the victim. I was always the victim until this. And I got on different medication. And again, I was going to stop taking my drugs. I had this wild ass idea, and a good friend of mine says, "Oh, that's a great idea, Val. You're in this, the largest emotional crisis you've ever been, and you're going to go off your meds." And I went, okay. So anyhow, and I kept going to NA, AA, CODA, kept staying in touch with my sponsor, kept staying in touch with my women, working on steps, doing everything that I was told to do. And there were some times when I would be at work, I would have to leave work because I couldn't contain my tears. I would have more visceral responses. I mean, I was off the chain. And I remember weekends when I would sit in a chair. I'd go to my Saturday afternoon home group, and I would sit in my chair and cry from Friday after work until Monday when I went back to work. I'd go to home group. But I let it go. I felt, for the first time, I really felt the pain of my part and his part. And I think what happened was, you know, I've asked God for things, and I've asked God for healthy relationships. And I think what happened was, by God, I got it. I got the bullseye of betrayal and abandonment in my center heart. I mean, it was like a fucking sledgehammer. And so it's been 7 years. And my life today, I've retired from the jail. I have a beautiful home. I have sponsees. Oh, I forgot to tell you, my home group is Spiritual Solutions in Nashville. I have a sponsor who has a sponsor who has a sponsor. We've got a great sponsorship family. I'm on a 4th step right now. I'm sitting on it. You know, I'm going to do it till I don't, till the pain gets great enough. So I've had surgeries and recovery. I've had an ankle replacement. I've had a hip replacement. I've had shoulder resurfacing. And what I did was what everybody else did. I told my sponsor, I told my girls, they would hold the drugs. I would take the drugs as prescribed and get off of them as soon as possible. I didn't relapse. So far I have not had a relapse. My mother died. I saw her take her last breath during in recovery. Life happens, and I'm really very content. My life is pretty stress-free. Some people might call it boring. I have gone from Codependents Anonymous to adult children of alcoholics and dysfunctional families. Because I think my dad was a functioning alcoholic, kind of like me. I had a job and, shit would happen. But my family was totally dysfunctional. And it's like that program has put the pieces together of why I have such a betrayal wound, the abandonment wound. When I was in my early, 4, 5, 6, 7, my mom would say, if you and your sister are not good, I'm going to run away from home. Well, Jesus Christ, when we tell those stories, we laugh about it. It's not funny. I mean, no wonder I have that abandonment wound. And so now that I know that, I'm understanding, and I've grown up in this program. I don't care how many years. What is said is people quit maturing when they start using. And by God, that's true. I'm 67 years old, and I'm an elder, and it's sometimes hard to wrap my head around the fact that I am, because sometimes I feel like a bumbling kid. Still, in some social situations, I'm an introvert, although I seem extroverted. And I think we can be both, But I tell you, 4 years ago, it was before COVID, I always wanted to travel the United States, but I was always waiting for somebody to go with me. So I'm recuperating from an ankle surgery. I go on Craigslist, and don't you know, there's this converted van less than a mile away from me as the bird flies. And I said, "Ooh, well, sure enough, I bought that thing and did a couple cross-country trips with it, with my dogs, and decided what I liked and what I didn't like. And I sold that one. And I got another van, and I had that built to spec. So I'm living my own dream. You know, put my old dog in there with me, and she and I take off. And I've been to Baja, Mexico, several cross-country trips. Friday, I'm going to Nova Scotia. But what I say is, my plan is to go to Nova Scotia. And what happens when you're making plans, life shows up. So I'm being open. I have full intention of going to Nova Scotia, going to Cape Breton, doing the Cabot Trail, eating lobster. And I hit meetings across wherever I go, right? Any 12-step, I can get what I need out of any 12-step. And that's my community. Because when I go, I know I'm home. I know what the readings are. I know we're all going in the same direction. I mean, there's some crappy meetings out there, yet I'm going to get something out of it. I'm going to feel that connection, and I know I belong, because I've never felt like I belonged. Well, I fucking know I belong, because I'm, you know, my disease comes out of my neck sometimes, and it comes out in all different ways. You know, right now it's about food. So, you know, I wouldn't trade this for anything. And I don't have a lot of shame anymore. You know, I've lost children, 3 marriages, fucked up social skills. And what's happened though is, every time I share, especially with a sponsee, and I see them and I validate what they're going through with no judgment, that takes that shame away, because I can't change the past. Yeah, I'd like to go back and rewrite some things, and I can't. So what I do is I use it to help another person. So hopefully they don't have to feel the pain and the misery that I did, and maybe not make those mistakes. So, you know, my sister, she's not one of us. And we were talking one time, and she said something about me being married 3 times. She goes, "Yeah, you brag about it." And I went, "What?" She said, "Yeah, you brag about it." And it helped me see that I'm not bragging. What I'm doing is I'm being transparent, and hoping that if somebody hears that, then maybe they won't think they're the only one. And I have to be really careful for that, because I'm out, you know, I'm out, I'm proud. Without this program, I would not have a rule book for life. There is no way I would be packing up my stuff in a van with my 11-year-old dog, heading out, going to Nova Scotia. You kidding me? I trust myself. Sometimes more than others. I still ask for help. I still own that I don't know everything, because when I quit being teachable and humble, I'm fucked. And I don't care that I have 20 years. If I don't do what I say to other people, I ain't got shit. Time means nothing. And when I first came in, of course, I'm like everybody else. Oh, well, We're all human, you know? And so I've built that capacity to be able to watch what people do. You can talk all damn day, but I want to see, you know? So I have to make amends. I don't always do what I say I'm going to do. And wow, what a relief to be able to say, you know what, I messed up. Will you forgive me? How can I make it right? Wow, what powerful. That's when I take the power back instead of giving it away. So I think that's about it. Okay.